The theme of the Stockholm World Water Week 2013 was Water Cooperation Building Partnerships. In this spirit, a seminar was conducted which looked at possible ways to improve the cooperation and thereby also the aid effectiveness in the WASH relief to development transition. The seminar was convened by the German WASH Network, consisting of 18 non-for-profit NGOs in Germany working on water, sanitation, and hygiene worldwide, and Sanitation and Water for All, a partnership of governments, donors, civil society, multilateral organizations, and other development partners working together to increase political prioritization, improve evidence-based decision-making, and mutual accountability for WASH. Co-conveners were the Federal Foreign Office of Germany, the German Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development BMZ, and the United Nations Secretary-General's Advisory Board on Water and Sanitation, UNSGAB. This short film will briefly summarize for you the issues and highlights that were covered and discussed during the seminar. So let's dive right in. Imagine the shape you see on the screen is the outline of country X. It is going through long-term development processes with regard to its WASH sector. But as we all know, such a development process is never linear, and it has its ups and downs due to a wide range of reasons, for example, political elections. Sometimes there are even greater setbacks. Emergencies can be man-made conflicts like war, or they can be caused by Mother Nature in the form of drought, earthquakes, tropical storms, and the like. The magnitude of devastation caused to country X and its population depends heavily on how well it is prepared to mitigate such events or whether it has the capacity to react accordingly. Now, as global warming takes its toll and conflicts over scarce resources are likely to increase in the future, we must focus on building up the resilience of all countries from A to Z. But as the graphic shows, the paths that lead out of each bright orange emergency and into the blue development phases pass through some very mucky-colored stages with unclear boundaries. Where does the emergency phase truly end, and where does unhindered, well-structured development begin again? What are the milestones to describe this transition? Is it perhaps the introduction of community management, the closing of the WASH cluster, or the introduction of a sector-wide approach? The situation becomes even more complex when you consider that all of this happens in front of a backdrop of changing aid architecture. With the Paris and Accra declarations, donors pledged to harmonize aid, but in the past years, new donors like China have come on the scene, and foundations like the one of Bill and Melinda Gates play a considerable role in the sector. This complicates the initial harmonization process and demands more capacity of the receiving country to know what is truly best for it. So let's take a closer look at our hypothetical country X and let's reflect upon how WASH humanitarian aid scenarios look in comparison to a WASH development one. If country X suffers from a man-made or natural catastrophe, humanitarian interventions are undertaken by international humanitarian actors and local domestic response. Ideally, this happens within 24 to 48 hours as the first chlorine tablets are supplied and the first trench latrines are dug. The goals of humanitarian interventions are to save lives, alleviate suffering, and to maintain and protect human dignity. The overall responsibility for the coordination of all activities during the relief phase of country X usually lies with the so-called commander-in-chief, such as the prime minister or president of the country. Within the thematic area of WASH, however, UNICEF quickly aims to install a WASH cluster, thereby providing a platform of coordination for all WASH actors. Now, this sounds simple enough until you zoom in and catch a small glimpse of the plethora of actors and thereby the challenges of true coordination. On its way out of the emergency, this country will, depending on the quality of the coordination, perhaps have to deal with other setbacks, such as cholera outbreaks, as was the case in Haiti. Water is bowsered, wells are dug, latrines are built, and responsibility is handed over to communities, ideally building local capacity and infrastructure that the country can hopefully benefit from in the long run. Now let's jump into the far future of the same country. The catastrophe is now long past. Country X is back on track to regular development. Development interventions are ongoing, implemented by a range of internal and external actors, and although these actors look the same at a first glance, they hardly are. ECHO has become Europe Aid. Relief NGOs have been replaced by developmental NGOs, and different departments and persons of the same UN agencies are involved. The principles of development aid vary widely compared to those of the emergency phase. Development does not react like relief often must. It is laid out in consistent national plans. The budgets are greater and have more continuity. The principles of development are to assist self-help benefiting society as a whole, working towards improvements in the long-term social, economic, and environmental situation of the country, and single interventions are hopefully not small islands of aid, but should ideally overlap and all complement each other. Most importantly, though, the country's government, this time in the function of the responsible ministry or ministries, is in the driver's seat with full ownership of its own development plans and their implementation. The focus of the seminar in Stockholm was therefore located right in between these two snapshots, asking how can we harvest potential that we are currently wasting? How do we establish a better connectedness between the actors involved in relief with those in development, and how do we improve the connectedness of budget lines in both realms? How do we ensure that the capacity and infrastructure built in the relief phase can be built upon in the development phase? How do we ensure a pump which was installed during emergency situation is maintained to deliver long-term benefits? How are local partners assisted in overcoming their challenges in this phase and in strengthening the transition? And how can we support to assure continuity when political responsibility changes hands? The seminar began with two defining presentations on the opportunities and boundaries of humanitarian aid and on WASH development aid and the prevalent current trends. This was followed by a block of practitioner stories looking at how different actors, governments of affected countries, donors, and NGOs experience the transition. Countries like Liberia and Myanmar presented country cases, and the experiences of BMZ, USAID, and UNICEF were shared. These stimulating inputs fed into 3 discussion groups with seminar participants, and the groups collected ideas for potential improvements along the discussion lines of changing aid modalities, indicators for transition milestones, and coping with changing functions, roles, and responsibilities. The results were summarized in brief presentations from each of the 3 tables, highlighting the main conclusions and a possible way forward. Now, all presentations and results of the seminar are available to you and can be downloaded from the German WASH Network website. Participants in Stockholm considered the seminar an important first step for initiating a much-needed dialogue between the WASH relief and development sectors, and now it is time to build upon seminar messages in order to improve connectedness and coherence between relevant actors and thereby increase overall aid effectiveness.
I think it was 2 messages. Firstly, there definitely is a need for better connectedness between the different strata of government, but also on the side of the implementing partners. And secondly, I'm convinced that there is a dire need for strengthening resilience, the resilience of individuals, households, institutions, in order to have everyone better prepared for the next external shock that is inevitable to come, either nature-made or man-made.
Mega disasters and a growing number of slow onset disasters highlight an increased risk of disasters worldwide. We have to change the way we are planning and delivering humanitarian assistance. At the same time, we have to strengthen external development assistance in disaster-prone countries. That means we have to change the way we're working together, moving away from the relief to development paradigm towards a more coherent approach. Together, we have to address short-term, mid-term, and long-term needs in a given country situation.